Alright. Let's see. Live stream in. Let's see here. See if we look, presentable enough for the camera. Hold on there. Hold on. Configure video, autofocus. Okay. Do. Fonts clean. That's a bit better there, I believe. It's a bit closer. Alright. Let's see. I think that should do it. I think. Live stream me in the center. And let's see. How many persons do we have in stream so far? 7 likes, 3 viewers. Better than none, right? Hey everyone, what's up? Sanjae Uchiha here. Welcome back to the channel. So, of course, by popular demand, even though popular demand is debatable because the amount of persons that actually voted to have the whole Naruto versus Naruto Shippuden, like, I'd be surprised if the amount of persons that voted actually come to this live. Oh no, I wasn't. Anthony, I think I have mentioned it from the last live stream where I said I was going to do another live stream segment where I let you guys vote on the topic and then, we do a live stream show on it. Probably not as long as our in the month subscriber streams, but here we are. So let me see something here. Let's bring this over here. So no, this should be over here. Let me just reaction. Bring up something over here. Because can't take off this. Let me just see how much persons actually voted for this versus the amount of persons that are actually they're actually going to turn out tonight. So see that we had 70 votes for, as I made that community post about it. So yes, 70 persons. Granted, I will, be fair. Last night I did have some issues with, Flow, my ISP, and for a decent portion of last night I didn't really have any net. So here we are tonight. So yeah, so if you're going into this, people who this is live, yes. Let's see. Oh, you never stayed to the end. I'm sure I've mentioned it. But alright, so 70 persons with over 50% voting for Naruto versus Naruto Shippuden. And it's funny because a few weeks before that, I did do the whole, or probably like a week or so, I did do the whole poll where I was asking persons which one would you say was better overall. And surprisingly, out of 113 persons that voted, like 75% were saying, Shippuden, or part 2 of Naruto, was the better part of the series. And I mean, I respectfully disagree, but I can understand why persons would say Shippuden. But I mean, we're here to discuss that tonight. Well, there's only 2 persons here now, but I hope you guys can see and hear me properly, all that jazz and blues. Let me know. Let me know. Alright, so you can see and hear me properly. Cool. Alright, good vibes. All right, so I guess I'll start it for the sake of the persons who will end up rewatching this as a video once it goes up after the stream ends. So Naruto versus Naruto Shippuden. I wouldn't want to say it's a hotly debated, debate, but I mean it is something that persons have asked within the the anime and manga community when it comes down to Naruto naturally. And to me, like, just to kind of get my feelings out of the way, I personally feel that part one Naruto is better than part two. But how do we come to that conclusion? That's the better question at the end of the day. So there's that. And especially since when it comes down to Shippuden or part two, we're talking about what, 400 plus chapters versus part one, which is about 240 chapters. So yeah, part two Shippuden has much more to work with when it comes on to comparing it to part one. But obviously we have to kind of make the comparison like how you cross compare any series, which is beyond the superficial or surface level stuff. How well does each series or each part of Naruto in this specific discussion, how well does each part accomplish what it sets out to do? How well does it accomplish its goal for each part essentially? So that's the end all be all way to do any like cross comparison, whether it be like different series, different cross comparisons. And I mean, just for argument's sake, I'm not saying it is the case, but probably somebody could say like Barney or something like does a better job of executing what it tries to do versus X anime. So that's the whole point that I'm trying to bring across with this whole Naruto versus Naruto Shippuden discussion. Even though part two has much more materials to actually work with at the end of the day, guys, definitely share out the stream. Remember, oh yeah, I should even do that myself. Let me just bring this over here, do that as well. So again, Naruto Shippuden, right? Let's dive headfirst into it because we're heading there tonight. So considering this is the same overall story, right? Let's kind of sharing out the stream on Facebook here. Hopefully persons join. Let's talk about it. Alright, yeah, so as I was saying, so when it comes down to Naruto and Naruto Shippuden, right, it becomes a bit more trickier than your typical cross comparison, like between different series, considering this is literally the same series. But what does each point or each section of the series try to accomplish? Now, given that part one is part one, I mean, the easy or overarching goal of part one, you could say, is setup. And of course, Shippuden being part two, or the final section of the series, of course, it's all about payoff. So the question now becomes, how well does part one set things up? And does it do an excellent job of setting it up more than does it do a better job at that versus Shippuden? How well does Shippuden actually execute the payoff? Because that's the better question at the end of the day, though. And I mean, I would say part one does a wonderful job of setting up things from the characters, their motivations, screen time, introducing supporting characters, the arcs. I mean, everybody remembers the Chunin exam, the whole structure of the world for the most part, and just establishing a great sense of what the series is going for from a thematic standpoint, I would say. Now, as I said, we gotta make the comparison or make this versus battle, for lack of a better term, based on the fact that we have to think about how well does Shippuden actually execute the payoff to everything that part one set up. Because I think most persons can agree that based on what I just said in terms of what part one set up, that yes, it did do a good job of setting that up. But Shippuden, how well does it pay off things? Now, I will say Shippuden had a lot of promise. Shippuden had a lot of promise, I would say, but between everything that part one set up, I would say, even though it was, don't get me wrong, it was exciting, it was fun going into Shippuden and reading it from week to week. I'm talking like grade 8 to to university for me. It was fun reading it from like week to week, fun times. And between things like Dry as Death, Itachi versus Sasuke, the Pain arc, the Fort Great Shinobi, the Fort Great Ninja War, um getting a full context for Naruto's the day of his birth. I mean, there's a lot of things to actually go on, but I think I would say Shippuden had like a narrowing effect. Like Kishimoto, and I think Kishimoto did actually confirm this in terms of Shippuden kind of like narrowed things down, right? To kind of like this parallel between Naruto and Sasuke, or this whole chasing Sasuke thing. And as a result of that, a lot of the supporting characters that could have made the story feel a lot more dynamic, I feel, and still tied back to, how those different elements, those different supporting characters could still bounce off the character of Naruto and Sasuke. I think the supporting characters get absolutely butchered in terms of like just they're just there. Like all the build up and potential that part 1 set up with the supporting characters, it goes to complete waste. And what I mean by this, I think the biggest example for me, and this is now subjective, is when Neji died. It was like whatever for me, because for the majority, like if you even take the filler out of Naruto Shippuden and we talk strictly about the manga, Neji had no literally no screen time in the grand scheme of things. So when he died, for me, it was like whatever. And it's reflected in other areas at the end of the day. Even to this day in Boruto, people are still asking, when's Rock Lee gonna get a decent fight? Like that has to account, that has to mean something, that has to signal that I am not just talking nonsense here. And that the whole build up and potential of the supporting characters basically went to waste when it comes on to Shippuden, or at least paying off what part 1 actually developed when it comes on to supporting characters. You guys remember when Naruto said, yo, I'm gonna change the Hyuga? And I guess for the grand scheme of things within Boruto, it does seem like that is the case, but we never really got the payoff or anything shown to us like that when it comes on to Shippuden. Like it's ridiculous. Well on. Yeah, okay. The connections seemed like it was dropping a while ago. Alright, yeah, so yeah, we didn't get anything when it comes on to like, the supporting characters really getting the love that they deserve. And I'm not saying that they're not there, you don't see them, not in the background, but it's just what's really driving you to still, keep up with these supporting characters is the build up that part 1 had. You have to be honest about that. Like part 1 did an excellent job of building up a lot of these supporting characters, and Shippuden just doesn't pay that off. I think 9 out of 10 persons would actually agree with me on that. So there's that. Now when it comes on to the main character, Naruto Uzumaki, I'll get to the chat here in a bit, as a little mini break. But when it comes on to the character of Naruto Uzumaki, that's the next very controversial thing, because all right, there are a lot of things we could judge and criticize about the story overall on a narrative level between part 1 and part 2, but when it comes down to part 1 and what it's set up, 9 out of 10 persons would agree that this was like an underdog story about Naruto, about a dropout, a person who doesn't really have much skills compared to the general public, and how he can, despite what hand life gives you, you can still do your best, work hard, and actually succeed at life, as long as you work hard and position yourself for the time, for that point in life when working hard aligns you with shit. I'm trying to be all philosophical with this, but working hard kind of puts you in that position for once something good does happen, it puts you in your position to receive it. So I could kind of break it down in a nutshell like that. But, and I think most persons would agree that was like the theme. And this kind of goes towards like a long-standing thing that most persons in the community would say stems from, you know, the fight between Neji and Naruto in part 1, where by the end of the series, by part 2, the end of part 2, a lot of persons are going to say that Neji was right. In terms of fate, destiny, Neji was right. And in terms of that theme, by the end of part 2, I'm not saying you can't take away the hard work that Naruto put in over the course of the 700 chapters, right? But on a thematic, from a writing standpoint, from Kishimoto's perspective, I would say that, yo, it was a major contradiction to the theme established in part 1 to actually have, you know, Naruto being the reincarnation of Ashura, Hagoromo's son. So, like, from a thematic standpoint, and of course being the child of prophecy, like, on the surface level it seems alright, but like when you really break it apart, it really contradicts the theme I feel like Kishimoto was going for from part 1 till now. I mean, it would have been, I don't have a problem with Hagoromo actually giving Naruto powers, that's 6 parts power. And I mean, I have less so a problem with him being the quote-unquote child of prophecy, but having him being like the reincarnation of, you know, Ashura, like, everything combined kind of serves as like a major contradiction to the theme that Kishimoto was going for, if you ask me. And yeah, it just kind of comes down to the fact that Neji was right. Naruto was destined for greatness. And as I said, it's kind of like a 50-50 thing where you can't necessarily take away, you know, the work Naruto put in, but on some substantial level, Neji was right, and it does serve as a somewhat of a contradiction to the, you know, the story that Kishimoto established in part 1. So there's that. Let me actually go to the chat here and see what you guys are saying. Agreed, Shippuden did have a narrowing effect. Yeah, I'm going to speak to that as well. I like how Sasuke last going to touch, there was not potion you needed. Immaturity. Yeah, like the whole Sasuke arc in part 2 is, I think it could be hotly debated, but I actually liked Sasuke's progression over the course of the arc. Over the course of part 2, Prime was perfect to give supporting characters top moments. They missed an opportunity there. Definitely agree. Sakura started so well, then it went downhill. Shippuden making most characters background characters. Sakura hid Sakura well though until the end of the arc. So all like DBZ and why long run tears with brand change are not beneficial. Dragon Ball most well written, Shippuden more popular. Yeah, it's kind of like that for real, Jake, where, you know, he had Dragon Ball, or, you know, even though the manga overall is just Dragon Ball, but between Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, in terms of branding it for the anime, yeah, DBZ is more popular, but Dragon Ball is more well written. And I would say it's the same thing here when it comes on to Naruto and Naruto Shippuden. Forever Green, yeah, it's been a while. Welcome to the stream, man. But yeah, but so supporting characters, main characters, and themes. But alright. Continuing on the character of Naruto himself, and more of that narrowing effect and limiting of supporting characters that I was essentially getting at initially. It extends to a lot of things, and I think even part 2, even the lack of support for supporting characters and like kind of limiting the scope of, you know, the series, I feel is proven within Shippuden or part 2 itself. Do you ever wonder why the Pain arc is so well received? Why people say it's the pinnacle of part 2 or pinnacle of Shippuden? Do you ever wonder why? It's because that arc essentially goes against, well, it goes against the narrowing effect, not in the case, not from the perspective of necessarily involving more supporting characters, but more so from the character of Naruto Uzumaki himself. Because if I'm being honest, right, part 2, things were so focused on Sasuke from the main character standpoint that being Hokage became like an afterthought to me, if I'm being quite honest. And I'm not saying, especially where, you know, part 1 ended with, you know, losing to Sasuke in the valley and all that, I'm not saying it shouldn't be like an important plot point going forward, but It's like everything else became an afterthought to, we're focusing on Sasuke, we're losing focus on other supporting characters who could have substantial impact in, driving some cool story arcs, and we're limiting it. But when it came on to the pain arc, we took things back from focusing on Sasuke per se, and we focused on Naruto and stuff that he could go through on a level that didn't necessarily include Sasuke, but at least it did help. It did contribute towards him actually understanding and seeing where Sasuke is coming from essentially, and it wasn't like laser focused on Sasuke. We had so much growth, so much emotional resonance with the audience, I feel, and overall persons really gravitated to the pain arc for a lot of other reasons, but at the core of it, subconsciously, I think that is a big reason as well, because the story finally felt like Naruto's story again. And essentially, I feel like that whole contrast between where things were before the pain arc and what it represented for Naruto's character during the pain arc kind of proves my point that Shippuden kind of dropped the ball by narrowing down the scope of the story, which of course, as I said, is affected the relevance and screen time of supporting characters, but it's also affected the character of Naruto. So yeah, essentially that. Now, Sakura. This also extends to Sakura, because I see you guys actually mentioning Sakura in the chat here. And I think Sakura is like the biggest example of what I'm trying to say between part 1 and part 2, where part 1 definitely did the work to actually set up Sakura's motivations for, what she wanted for herself and how she could contribute to the overall conflicts they were going through. No, that we've kind of read. No, that Naruto's been over manga wise since what? It's been almost 7 years now. I can look back and say part 1 Sakura, I really didn't have a problem with her, honestly, because in the grand scheme of things, it was set up. And honestly, part 1, I think all things considered, did an excellent job of setting up Sakura, which is why when it came on to paying off all that setup, a lot of persons vibe with Sakura in the Kazekage retrieval arc when it comes on to everything she did, the fight with Sasori, and just tag teaming with Granny Chio. And I know a lot of persons will defend Sakura and say she's not useless, she's not worthless. She did a lot of during the Fort Grand Ninja War and everything else from after the Kazekage retrieval arc and beyond, and that's true. But usually when persons say Sakura is useless, I like to think of it that they're talking about it within the confines of part 2, specifically Shippuden, after the Kazekage retrieval arc, because Kishimoto to me kind of dropped it was kind of like downhill after the Kazekage retrieval arc, if I'm being honest. Honestly, it's like when it comes on to you, alright, if I was writing Naruto, if I'm being honest, like after the fight with Granny Chio, I would have developed Sakura's abilities even more in terms of what she could do. I always wanted Sakura to get like some elemental beast attacks and everything. But you see, as a result of that narrowing effect, that part 2 that Shippuden actually focuses on, and this whole need to focus on Sasuke, because that doesn't just affect Naruto's character, but also Sakura's character. And it kind of feels like everything else is sidelined because of that, in a sense. Because between, like, outside of Naruto, Kakashi, the Akatsuki, the Uchihas, like it didn't really, yeah. I want to actually dedicate a stream to the Fort Ninja War in itself, so I won't dive too deep into the war itself, like picking it apart too much. But I mean, and I think I'm jumping over the place here, but yeah, Madara was pretty much the saving grace of the war for me. if I'm being quite honest, I'll say that for now. A good female lead. One Piece has failed in that part. It is selective criticism. Naruto Shippuden better than Naruto. Honestly, I don't want to turn this into a whole Naruto versus One Piece thing, but I vibe with the females in One Piece. Probably they don't. It's probably a similar issue where they don't get as much screen time as you'd want them to as well. But every now and then Oda will remind us, especially like with the main set of characters, he will remind us of the utility of them. So it kind of keeps reminding us of the relevance of them. Like for example, even though it was kind of done for like funs and giggles, for those of you who actually watch One Piece here, between going from Zou to Whole Cake, not Zou to Whole Cake. Which section was it again? Yeah, sorry, pre-time skip. When Luffy was trying to leave Amazon Lily, and of course he couldn't navigate for shit. So yeah. For one, the era shonen just didn't write women well. I would say if Nami wasn't there on Whole Cake, Luffy would have died to Caracas. So just saying. There are some points in One Piece where it seems like it's just subtle and it's just like we're blowing over the females, but there are some key moments I would say the utility of certain characters is there, so there's that. But anyway, back to Naruto versus Naruto Shippuden. Young Skilla, wagwan, Robert Smiley, welcome to the stream too. Yeah man, so as I was saying guys, the whole basis for me saying, again for the guys that are coming in now, the whole basis for me saying Naruto Part 1 is better than Part 2, despite the fact that, we have to contend with the fact that Naruto is only about 240 chapters, where Part 2 or Shippuden is about 400 and something manga chapters. I'm looking at it from how well each part did what they set out to do, which of course, Part 1 being Part 1, it seeks to actually set up the story, the world, the characters, the themes, and how well does Shippuden or Part 2 actually pay off to all those elements. So how well does it pay off versus how well does it set up? And setup for me is good. There are a few other things I feel like they could have done, because I feel like there could have been one more arc before the Sasuke retrieval arc, but for the most part I think Part 1 did a decent job. Part 2, while it was exciting and did some decent payoff to say the least, there are a lot of areas I feel Part 2 actually falls short, and as a result leads it to like a lower rating for me personally than Part 1, or should have been filled as a previous Ninja Wars. Well, true, I will agree with that, Anthony. And yes, Orochimaru was was one of the best things about Part 1, I'm not gonna lie. But I'm talking strictly canon material, the 700 chapters of the manga. So good, they cover most of the low points. Yeah, the Madara payoff was good too, really setting the hype. So to kind of recap some of what I've said, essentially I did talk about supporting characters, the main character, and the themes that go with Naruto Uzumaki as a character himself. I've kind of strayed and talked about Sakura as well, and the fact that some parts of Part 2 Shippuden itself, like the pain arc specific, in contrast to everything else, really sells the point that I'm trying to make. So there's that. Because I appreciate the current one indeed, a young killer. So what have I missed? What have I not really compared when it comes on to Naruto and Naruto Shippuden? Now, supporting characters are one thing. Sasuke. Should I talk about Sasuke specifically? Nah. Right, what would you guys want me to compare otherwise? Because some of those points that I talked about are pretty strong points coming out of like a versus discussion between these two parts, if I if I do say so myself. Just generally speaking though, I will say, because of the problems I personally have with Part 2, I always say that Naruto, the main story, didn't have to end yet. It really did not have to end yet. I mean, that could be the fact that they have so much novels now, apart from making money, could be like them proving me right, but it didn't really have to end yet, honestly. In terms of how they handle deaths, that's a good one. I mean, how many deaths did we get in part one? We had Zabuza and Haku. Um, we had the third Okage. The Sound 4 died. Kimamaru. Who else am I missing death wise? A bunch of random Jonin. Am I missing anyone? Am I missing anyone? No, I don't think that's all that's in part one, right? Yeah. Survival of the power drums. All right. Yeah, the power drums are our next thing too, but I'll talk about that after comparing the deaths. So, deaths. Of course, usually, when it comes down to deaths within any like work of fiction, we have to talk about their importance or relevance to the plot. Is it just for shock value? Does it really inspire or affect the other characters around that character that died? Stuff like that. When it comes on to Naruto, especially since I've actually been watching like Roger's base, initial watch through of Naruto, like the Zabuza and Haku death, I think was really well executed. Like looking back at it now, especially with how everything was still in the whole backdrop of you had that whole criminal organization like mafia boss element to it as well. And I think Zabuza and Haku's that really kind of showcase the nature of the ninja world in the grand scheme of things, between being a tool, being a weapon, and contrasting and comparing that to the human emotions that these persons try to actually forget. Or essentially, like, it kind of goes back to the whole Obito statement in terms of those who abandon their mission are scum, but those who drop their friends essentially are worse than scum, stuff like that. So I think Zabuza and Haku's death were handled really well. It really showed the merciless nature of the ninja world, I would say, and how it's kind of developed this culture to be, weaponize these persons and just doesn't really hammer home, or they've kind of developed a culture to forget that these persons are people too. I would say that. So those set of deaths were good. I could probably dissect that a bit more though. Of course, the third Hokage's death was, impactful as well. I wanted more screen time with him beforehand, but it was impactful. I mean, of course, this is the Hokage, the person that Naruto's aspiring to be, the strongest person in the village, and to see him die, that was impactful as well. The Zone 4 were like, whatever. Kimimaro. Well, I probably didn't really have much death. A lot of the deaths in Shippuden were like between Granny Chiyo. Granny Chiyo's death kind of is in the same vein as like Zabuza and Haku, I would say. Dry, of course, probably the most impactful death in the series, is the next thing. So honestly, and then Itachi figuring out all we were supposed to figure out after the fight with Sasuke. So in the grand scheme of things, I think all things considered, the death and the impact on the story and what they meant for other characters around them, I think that is all equal when it comes on to parts 1 and 2. So there's that. Power skill, as young Skiller was saying, and I think most of the issues really come from, well, if you would really call them issues, come from the Fourth Great Ninja War, specifically Naruto and Sasuke, and how they started that arc versus how they ended that arc. Honestly, from a thematic standpoint, it's not really, or at least based on the theme that they established with part 1 and how I actually dissect it now, I think the jumps in power weren't really the problem. It's just the execution of the fights. Really, persons were upset that the fights didn't really feel as intricate, or it feel like it was getting that DBZ esque treatment where it's just Biju Bomber, bigger, bigger, bigger. You see me? So I think that's what persons were really having a problem with. Like as the series went on, it didn't really feel as intricate or well crafted in terms of like the battle choreography. So just that. The reason why I said I didn't really have a much problem, I take specifically the character of Naruto. If we go along with the theme that we've established with part one, where we were saying it's an underdog story, and if we talk about life and the fact that there are factors that will always be outside of your control, but if you work hard and position yourself for once when something positive but out of your control actually intersects with your path in life, then fine. The power-ups are alright in terms of that, if I'm thinking about it from that perspective. Or as I said, even Hagoromo giving Naruto the power, it's fine. The problem is that when it comes down to that underdog theme, the fact that the combination of making Naruto the child of prophecy and Hagoromo the reincarnation of Ashura, to me it contradicts the theme at the start of the series. That's what I'm saying. And of course Shippuden the story in itself actually kind of tells on itself when you have to kind of reevaluate the fight between Naruto and Neji and say, oh, Neji was actually right. So that's all I'm saying essentially. So I mean, yeah, they did go with some hacks abilities and everything. I will admit that. But I mean, there were some points where, like, for example, even the whole unmasking of Obito and how they actually planned that, I thought that was nice. That was a nice touch in terms of how they planned out that whole strategy. That was nice. But I think for the most part, this is kind of delving into our, going into the whole fights comparison between part one and part two. And I think the easy answer to it is that for the most part, like in terms of percentage of part one, it did kind of stick to the charm of what made Naruto Naruto. And while for a section of part two that was the case, the further part two went on, you could say a nice percentage of the fights probably didn't adhere to the charm of what made Naruto Naruto. So there's that. Which is why a lot of persons during the final fight between Naruto and Sasuke really loved once they came back from heaven and they kind of brought things back to a taijutsu fight beatdown essentially, or at least the added scenes they had in the anime. Persons really love that, and to this day, even in Boruto, persons really love the hand-to-hand. Sanjay has a genjutsu outside his blue screen background. Why said genjutsu? Yeah, Rob, just cool. Stop pressuring me, man. It's not that serious. You see me? But yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like the fights in part one, I think really adhere to the charm and everything. But part two, like honestly, as we kept going on and on and on, it's kind of like the charm of the fights steadily went down. So there's that. Now, what I will speak to, and I'll talk about this again whenever you guys vote for me to do, a segment dedicated strictly to the Fourth Great Ninja War. But I'll repeat it there. But the whole lack of exploiting the potential that was set up with like supporting characters in part one, and in favor of, say, focusing on Sasuke, kind of narrowing down the story to focus on these few elements here, whether it be Sasuke or Sasuke. As a result of that, when it comes on to the ultimate final Fourth Great Ninja War, honestly, it kind of made the war boring, if I'm being quite honest. Now hear me out before you crucify me and turn off and unsubscribe and all that jazz and blues. Going into the Fourth Great Ninja War, I remember back then I was hyped because I was I was like, I didn't think about it critically back then, but I was thinking like, shit, they had so much problem beating each Akatsuki member, and like Kabuto's bringing back all these members, and yo, this is gonna be hype, and how are they gonna win, and all that jazz and blues. But it's like once the war started, it's like, eh, eh, eh. It was like, almost whatever, if I'm being quite honest, because like a lot of the characters that we've come to, grow and love when it comes down to the Naruto cast, I will once again say like a lot of the driving force and our drive to see what's gonna happen with them in the war is really built off the development and screen time they had from part one, with the exception of like Shikamaru, or Shikamaru's team generally speaking, because they actually had development within part two. So let me at least give credit where credit is due. But it's like everybody else is like, the war was kind of like on a level, if I'm being quite honest. But it wasn't until Madara came in that the war really, really, really started going well for me personally. And of course, that is based on the build-up that not only has been happening since part one, but also part two of Naruto. And as a result of that, Madara's introduction into the war itself was met with relatively positive reception, I would say. And that's because of the build-up through part one and part two. But I can't say the same for the supporting characters, where during the war it's like almost whatever, honestly. So there's that. And one more thing I will say when it comes down to the whole narrowing effect or limiting of the potential, that whole limiting potential effect that part two has in the grand scheme of things, and this is subjective as well. To be honest, a lot of times when I was reading from grade 8 till university every week, like personally I would actually prefer once we switched to see what was happening with Sasuke. I thought the story was going a lot more, it was just, there's a lot more interest from me in the story when Sasuke came on. Because after a while, I'm sure you guys realize we'd focus on our arc with Naruto, then we'd focus on our arc with Sasuke, then Naruto, then Sasuke, until, their paths, fully intersect in the 4th grade ninja war. And essentially that was what Kishimoto's kind of confirmed this in some shape or form. Back in an interview, I believe he did like back in 2014, 2015. So yeah, but honestly, yeah, I was really digging the whole, seeing what's happening with Sasuke. And of course, that's because the story in itself kind of was limiting, as I was saying earlier in the stream, limiting things with Naruto and his character. Because everything is for the sake of getting Sasuke back. So these set of characters over here are supporting Naruto in getting Sasuke back, and Sasuke just focusing on himself and what he wants to do. See more information about Orochimaru's vessels and the selection process, that would have been good as well. Hell no, Sanjay, I disagree with you, my dog. Sakura kills so many episodes, so many with all her cry baby moments. Rob, I feel like we're on the same page. We're talking after the Kazukage retrieval arc, right? Regarding Sakura. I'm not, if that's the case, I'm not I'm not disagreeing with you. What did I say in terms of that would go against that? Because basically what I was saying regarding part one, when it comes down to Sakura, strictly comparing Naruto versus Naruto Shippuden, I didn't have a grand problem with part one because it was set up for a character. She got some decent payoff in the Kazukage retrieval arc, but after that, like any further potential, and I acknowledge the fact that she does a lot of good here and there or throughout the rest of the story, but the potential that I feel her character would have really had is really limited by the fact that things are really narrowed down to really focus on Sasuke. In terms of the darker moments. Yeah, I get you. Yeah, I mean, I like the darker moments too, but you have to be, I would say persons have to be critical as well in terms of how well does it's kind of like, yeah, you like the dark moments, but how well does it actually execute the darker moments? And even if it does execute well, was it as well as it could have been? Like, these are the questions I'm essentially asking when it comes on to comparing both parts. So I'm not necessarily bashing any part, but each part has, I would say, has their own set of problems. Because even going back to part one, I think part one had a lot of potential world building wise. And I actually feel like part one could have been longer. But like after a while, like after the end of part one, it's like the story never really capitalizes fully on the world building, I feel. Because like after the Zabuza arc, the Land of Waves, I never really get that whole, like with Gato and like these mafia lords and criminal organizations. I don't get that vibe again from the story, like going forward after that. So yeah. There is definitely that. There is definitely that. I know it's funny because, alright, narrowing things back down to Sakura, you'll find that a lot of the payoff that I think I would have wanted to see with Sakura is actually happening more so in the novels, more so than what happened in the 700 chapters of Naruto, essentially. So there is that as well. And I feel like I want to do a specific, not a stream, but probably like a video on this. Where, like, for lack of better expression, the running down of Sasuke, it feels like it's not 100%, but to like a substantial degree. Like the whole running down of Sasuke is payoff to like a build up we didn't necessarily get. Now, let me explain what I mean. You know how like our persons right now would compare the relationship between Naruto and Sasuke and Boruto and Kawaki? Where persons would say, are Naruto and Sasuke really best friends? Wouldn't you say Shikamaru and Choji were better friends to Naruto than Sasuke? Like, I feel like persons have either heard or even asked themselves that on some level at some point throughout their Naruto watching or reading career. And this is why I'm saying this is why I'm saying it's like narrowing down the series to, Naruto, to Team 7, the Akatsuki, and keeping up with the Uchihas and more eyeballs and stuff. It kind of feels like at least the Sasuke portion of that from Naruto and Sakura's perspective were paying off a build-up we didn't necessarily get. And that would be the fault of like part one for not necessarily, showing us more details of the dynamic, because more so the dynamic between Naruto and Sasuke is more of a, at least before the whole Indra and Ashura thing was revealed, it was more like an empathetic kind of thing from, each of their perspectives. But it's like the way how Naruto and Sakura go crazy over him is like, I feel like I think looking back at it, a lot of persons would say, I feel like we're missing some context from why these persons are going so hard for for this guy. He is to be. So there's that. Respect, Rob. Respect. I was kind of talking about the whole, attendance for this stream, because we had like 70 persons actually vote on what they wanted me to talk about for this first show. This might be like a weekly show. Let me go back over here. As you can see, most persons, because the options were the Fort Great Ninja War, Naruto vs. Naruto Shippuden, which you see most persons voted for 70 votes, and of course Yu Yu Hakusho. But most persons, of course, voted for tonight's topic. So there's that. So yeah. But we don't actually have 70 persons in here tonight, do we? So yeah. But yo, honestly, Um, I mean, all of that is really all of what I've said so far is at the core, and I'll basically like summarize when I'm ready to almost end the stream. But what else am I missing between the comparison between these two parts, people? And ended quickly because Sasuke left too soon. He bounced 27 episodes in or something like that, and from there it was full go. Just got here. Yo, King Bio, Wagwan, Wagwan. I agree with you, Jake. Cause it's basically what I'm saying. I honestly feel like part one could have been longer. Like there could have been at most two or at least one extra arc before the Sasuke retrieval arc. Honestly, to kind of do just a bit more world building before part two. Nowhere as big as you make it out to be. Um. So like, all right, guys, let me know. Let me know in the chat, cause as King Bio says, because yeah, I wouldn't necessarily rate part one say like a 10 and say like part two is like a 5. I wouldn't say the difference between them is that drastic, but I would say the difference between them is at least 2 points. At least 2 points, yeah. So maybe like part one could be like a 9 or 8, but part two could be like a 7 or a 6. Well, probably a 6 would be too low. Probably that would be too low. But essentially what I'm saying, King Bio, and again, apologies for the persons that have been here since the start, kind of repeating, but essentially what I'm saying is that in comparing part one and part two, 0.5 difference, you would really say that? Yeah. I wouldn't say 0.5. It's at least like a 1.5 difference for me, for quite a bit of reasons. If you really go back and even take into the stream afterwards. But I'll kind of repeat my points in summary going forward. So, but I'm trying to think if there's anything I'm forgetting to actually compare between part one and part two, because we've talked about the main character, the central theme of Naruto, between part one and part two, between building it up and paying it off. We've talked about supporting characters, and how that's essentially affected certain portions of the narrative. We've talked about Sakura as one of the big examples of just supporting characters. Single villain as good as Pain. Yeah, Pain was a really good character to actually pay off a lot of things. I would say they would have been building up with the whole Shinobi system since part one. But like an excellent, amazing villain alone isn't going to put part two over part one for me, essentially. The way I'm comparing this Bio is the fact that part one only has about 240 chapters and part two has 400 and some chapters. Like how you would actually compare any, like cross compare any series, you gotta actually analyze how well each part does what it sets out to do. And of course, part one being part one, you have to judge it by how well does it set up stuff. And of course, you judge part two by how well does it pay off the setup that we got in part one. So that's essentially what I'm basing it off of. Yeah, because essentially, in a nutshell, guys, one, when it comes down to theme of being an underdog, working hard, going against fate or destiny, we can agree that these are the central themes. But when it comes on to part two in the penultimate arc, even though we can't take away the hard work from Naruto, Kishimoto essentially contradicts the theme he's established in part one with making Naruto. It's a combination of making Naruto the child of destiny, or the child of prophecy, whatever, and having him be the reincarnation of Ashura. So, and of course, puts the fight between Naruto and Neji into under you have to compete with a different set of lens to say, okay, Neji was right. So that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, yeah, he did break his destiny. The whole cycle of the brothers fighting each other. Fine. I'm not gonna say it's a 100% like problem. I can't. I don't really look at things. I don't really look at well. I don't look at a lot of things in black and white, but a substantial portion of that choice does contradict the themes built up from part one. We can say that. The whole female character issue is kind of like I think across the board with part one and part two. Between Tsunade probably might be the best female character, more than likely, cause yeah. But yeah, so King Bio, as I was saying as well. So there's a major contradiction of the whole themes. You have the supporting characters where a lot of them are prime and ripe for potential and story arcs. They've been set up and built up from part one, but part two, they've basically become background characters essentially. And the story in itself basically confirms this for me at least, where persons like Neji dying don't really resonate with me since he hardly has anything to do in part two, or even persons even now in the Boruto age still wanted to see Rock Lee have a decent fight. So I think points like these really confirm that there's like some weight to what I'm saying essentially. So there's that. That's the thing though with Neji. Like Kishimoto could have still given Naruto the power up without making him the reincarnation of Ashura. That's all he had to do to really confirm, like, not contradict anything. Really and truly. It wasn't like any elaborate thing he really needed to do. He could have said, yeah, you can remind me of Ashura, but yeah. So, yeah. That's what I'm saying with Rock Lee, as you said, Rock Lee being shafted, and even up to the Boruto era, persons are still want to see Rock Lee get a fight, and that shaftment, if I can really coin a word, if that even is a word, it applies to a lot of the other supporting characters that had a decent amount of build up, or they had potential going into part two to really like build on them even more. So that's what I'm saying, and. Moving on from the theme, supporting characters, it's this narrowing of the story to make it a bit more focused on some key narrative elements such as the Uchiha, Sasuke, the Akatsuki, yada yada. The Akatsuki are fine, but like the whole narrowing of it kind of really affects the potential of the story for me, at least, because of that, how to put it again, it's like characters like Naruto and Sakura don't really shine as much as they could have, is what I'm saying essentially. And on a subconscious level, again, I feel this is another point where the story itself confirms the weight of what I'm saying, because I feel like on a subconscious level, when the story actually finally becomes like moves from being Sasuke to Shippuden to actually being Naruto Shippuden again in the Pain arc, on a subconscious level, I feel that's why persons actually like the Pain arc as well, in conjunction to the everything else that happened in that arc. But the story actually felt like it was Naruto's story again, and not just Naruto chasing down Sasuke for I think you guys get what I'm saying. So, yeah. So essentially that. And then especially looking back on it, as I said before, chasing down Sasuke, which that whole part of the whole narrative is pay off in Shippuden for build up we never necessarily fully got in part one. Or could have been fleshed out better in part one at least. For sure. Alright, so time to go back to the chat. Is what you guys said. They could have killed off Shin and Kiba. They was garbage to me. See, as I'm saying, supporting, there's nothing with the supporting characters. Part 2 had better villains for sure. Part 1 had better side characters. Alright, yeah. Then she was 50% right, but 50% wrong. My thing was, I don't think Naruto disagreed about Destiny being real. I think his thing was that he was mad about Neji saying Destiny can't be changed. Yeah, alright, 50%, 50%. Yeah, I guess in the grand scheme of things, with how things ended between the cycle of Ashura and Indra, then yeah, 50% is 50%. But trust me, it was a major. At the time, I didn't really have much of a problem with it because I wasn't really reviewing or being critical with the chapters then. But talking to persons, seeing what person have to say, and just looking at it from an objective standpoint, that really did contradict the whole theme Kishimoto was going for from part one. Reanimation made it to where nobody would say that the plot called for it. That's true, but I mean, the real big parts of reanimation didn't really come till the Fort Red Ninja Wars. I didn't really have a problem. But they would never kill off the main character. Ah, boy. Well, I mean, he did almost technically die in the war, so there's that. I'm not changing it. It was like King of Lightning tricked this community into believing that. In terms of what the contradiction to the whole theme, or the whole that Neji was essentially right. Because I think where the perspective that King is coming from is that he's saying like, Naruto was always destined for greatness. That's probably what they were going for. What he was basically trying to say essentially was the case. Which, I mean, could be true because because a lot of things you have to really take into consideration, guys. It's like a show show don't tell, because a lot of person would say, yeah, Rock Lee did become a successful ninja like he wanted to, but in the grand scheme of things, given that Rock Lee might be the hardest working ninja in the series, and yes, he's not the main character, but definitely didn't get the highlights for it. Yeah, there were too many ways to make Naruto follow Hinata. Alright. So I wouldn't want to talk about the pairings and the characters falling in love, but like there's nothing really to really compare it to in part one. Alright, maybe there is. Can I really? Can I really? Yeah, I don't think there's much to compare there, honestly. Because of course Kishimoto wasn't really like focusing too much on love or anything like that. Oh no, but what I could say is that it's the lack of opportunity between both parts, between not much attention was paid to, developing and crafting the dynamic between Hinata and Naruto to its fullest potential. And I honestly feel waiting until the last Naruto movie was like the wrong thing. Oh, kind of back to the chats here. Big for me. Pre-time skip. So now the gap between pre-time and post is big for me. Time skip stomps. Post-time skip. That's a whole other discussion. But I kind of feel, yeah, pre-time skip One Piece was I think the thing with post-time skip One Piece is just like, since everything is building towards the whole Yonko conflict. So Oda definitely went a different route with post-time skip One Piece versus pre-time skip, where things are kind of building towards something. There are a lot of more self-contained, well, probably not self-contained, couldn't say that. There are a lot of individual arcs where you could say, okay, shit, yeah, this is good, this is great. But since everything, it's kind of like you could think of post-time skip like one big arc. So I think that's why you could say pre-time skip One Piece. But I digress. So what I'll do now, because I think I've got my main points across from why I feel part one is better than part two, from the perspective of how well does part one do a better job of building up the world or building up the story than part two paying off the story. From that perspective, let's not think of it from a top level superficial level. I'm putting the discussion to you guys from that perspective specifically. Does part one do a better job of building up the story versus part two paying off the story? But what I'll do right now, 5 to 7 minutes. You guys can come on. Let me hear what you said. And thing. So I'm opening up the Discord. King Bio, what I'll do, I was thinking of doing that in terms of like the other topics I had in the poll for this whole, once a week live stream segment. I'd probably just do the other topics, the other options on the poll. But what I'll do is I'll still put out a poll between tomorrow and Monday for you guys to vote on. I'll still have Yu Yu Hakusho within that because I really want to talk about Yu Yu Hakusho, but I still want it to be a thing that you guys vote on, even though a lot of most of the persons who voted aren't actually here in the show. So yeah, but yeah. So I'm opening up the Discord now. Link in the description below. Doom. So I think I'll configure this to be one at a time. So each person gets like 5 to 7 minutes. We talk because I want to. The thing is, I don't want these streams, these special segment streams, to be super long. Like I don't want it to be like a 2.5 hour thing. Probably 2 hours the most. But like 1 to 2 hours. So yeah, I don't want it to be as long as the subscriber streams. A Yu Yu Hakusho versus Hunter x Hunter. Unfortunately, and I know you guys are gonna crucify me, I haven't gotten into Hunter x Hunter like that just yet. I really need to. I know Togashi, the greatest. I know, but all in due time. All in due time. Jeez and peace. But yeah, guys, it's time. Link in the description below. Doop. Hold on there. Let's see. Window capture. Let's see. Okay. No. Hold on. I was trying to kind of configure this for like I forget. No, general madness, live streaming, no. Yo. Doop. Alright. And let me put myself back on top here. Okay, this isn't working properly. Jeez and peace. Do. No. Hold on. Hold on. Main scene, live stream main. Hold on, guys. Grid mode. Main scene. Just kind of running through my scenes here. Strange. Desktop. Why is it switching? Like desktop image. For some reason, these scenes aren't displaying properly from OBS. I always got to have some technical issues apparently. Just can't do these streams in peace. I don't think it was near perfect, minus Genkai being revived. Alright guys, the Discord is open despite the technical issues that are actually going on screen now. But the Discord is open for you guys to actually come on and actually talk on the topic. 5 to 7 minutes each person. Find it strange. Get scene. Window capture. Put this back here. That was weird. Weird, weird, weird. Let me just put this back on. There we go. So, General Madness. Is anyone going to come on and we discuss Naruto versus Naruto Shippuden? Let me know. Let's see what's going on. I mean, the whole Genkai being revived thing is one thing, but I didn't have too much of a problem with it. I mean, she did like fully die in the end. And manga wise, even before earlier than the anime portrayed, so yeah. See party I don't want to have on this on the side. Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough, Jake. Orochimaru bringing back the first and second character fight. The third arc was the best episode in part 1 to me. It was god tier level. Yo, like yo, that was hype, I'm not gonna lie, because yo, you're thinking, especially like with the third coffee, it's like, yo, someone's gonna bring back the fourth. But I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I find it funny that the portrayal of Hashirama and Tobirama, they're like, I mean, it's understandable they weren't at full power, but it's such a disservice looking at how strong they actually were, like in life, or at least later on in the series. So there is definitely that. But yeah. But all right, since most persons seem busy or stuff, I'll just wrap up, and of course that falls in line with at least me not making these special segment streams not being too long, so at least for the persons who want to go and watch over the stream, then all the better. So in conclusion, what I say is that Naruto part 1 is better than part 2, specifically from the perspective of how well it achieves what it sets out to do. I think it does a better job of setting up what it wants to set up for the story than how Shippuden pays off everything that part 1 stood for. From that perspective is what I mean when I say part 1 is better than part 2. Things like the theme and the main character, supporting characters, to a degree, the fights weren't necessarily paid off as well as they could have based on how things were set up with part 1. Part 2 definitely did narrow down and focus on specific things and kind of omitted some of the things that were built up from part 1, such as narrowing down the story to, you know, focusing on Sasuke and certain elements, and as a result, things like the supporting characters, the main character, didn't really live up to, you know, their full potential, I would say. So in the grand scheme of things, Shippuden or part 2 just could have been much better, but as King Bio would say in the chat here, the difference between the two isn't necessarily world shattering. At least for me, you could say, just for argument's sake, if part 1 was an 8, part 2 for me is like a 7, or worst case 6.5. It's like at most like a 1.5 difference or so. So yeah, but all in all, I think this was a decent discussion with you guys, kind of get my points across. Indra having the same pattern sharing and what I can put on, but the same amount of problems in part 1. I think that was anime only, if I'm being honest, between with the Indra and Sasuke having the same Mangekyo Sharingan pattern, because when I vividly remember when Kishimoto initially showcased Indra and Ashura in the manga, Indra had a different Mangekyo Sharingan design that was portrayed in that quote-unquote filler arc in the anime. So that's Studio Period. That's on Studio Period, not on Kishimoto. So there's that. But yeah, that's my thoughts on why part 1 is better than part 2 in a nutshell. Yeah, if anything, we can talk about this more in the end of month subscriber stream, but tomorrow I'll be putting out a fresh new poll for you guys to vote on for next week's show, which I'll hopefully get to do on Friday night instead. Best case scenario Thursday night. So look out for it, guys. Naturally, the topics will be for now. I'll still be bringing back Yu Yu Hakusho and the Fourth Grade Ninja War to discuss. For you guys to vote on for us to discuss. But I'm thinking about 2 more topics to actually talk about, which I'm not really sure about just yet. But I don't know. But it should be fun all the same. So yeah. Alright, before I go, you guys can let me know what other 2 topics you'd want me to talk on. Like, just generally speaking. If it's even like a specific arc within Naruto, if not a specific anime that I've actually watched, then yeah, you could let me know. Could let me know. Ew. Doop. While I mess around with this thing here. Doop. Could have ensured that I actually cropped this. Yeah. This aren't just aliens. The whole the whole aliens thing is another topic. I just, well, that's a topic for, like, if you guys vote on the Fourth Great Ninja War being a topic of discussion in itself for the next show. So vote away. I'll definitely would have to talk about Kage and introducing aliens and stuff. There are a lot of things to talk about when it comes down to the Fourth Great Ninja War if you guys vote for it. There will be a number of stuff that will definitely repeat from tonight's show in terms of, like, talking points such as supporting characters and how, you know, the build up and use of them throughout part 2 kind of affected certain things in the Fourth Great Ninja War for me, like Neji's death not being impactful at all, but so yeah. But anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. Of course, it wasn't the full 70 persons that voted that were in attendance tonight, but respect all the CM. Of course, like, share, subscribe. This should be going up right away once the stream ends for you guys to rewatch, and I guess if anything we can talk more in the comment section of this stream once it goes up. But thanks for coming out for this first special live stream segment. I don't know what to call it yet. Probably I could call it Uchiha corner or something. Yeah, I know it sounds stupid, but that's the point. So yeah, so just to be reminded, I'll be trying to do these streams every week where we talk about specific arcs within Naruto or specific characters or things that you guys vote on that I'll leave in the community section of my channel before, like, up to 4 or 5 days before the the show dates or show nights, like what we're having now. So that's basically it. So I'll be creating the poll for tomorrow or Monday, worst case scenario, and you guys can vote on what you want us to talk about for the next show next week, Thursday or Friday. So yeah, but thanks for coming out again, guys. I shall see you in the Boruto reaction and review tomorrow. And whoa, tomorrow is Goku Day, isn't it? Shit. Doing like a recording or a video would be good. Anyway. Enjoy the rest of your night, guys. I'll see you in the next one.